Yeun says stern action will be taken against him.
Security concerns will top discussions when Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe meets US President Donald Trump in Washington. Mr. Abe's visit comes ahead of the Trump-Kim summit in Singapore next Tuesday.
Well, US National Security Advisor John Bolton will attend the historic talks between Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim. Mr. Bolton's hardline rhetoric infuriated North Korea and nearly derailed the summit. Hello, I'm Glenda Chong.
And I'm Steve Lai, and Sarah Alcaldi joins us for the business news with G7 leaders bracing for tense discussions.
Exactly, Steve. Now, the heads of G7 countries are reportedly gearing up to put pressure on the U.S. president for his recent trade tariffs. Their summit in Canada this week is set to tackle simmering trade tensions. And we're tracking the top news stories across Asia. On tonight's show, Leong Wai-kit brings us the Singapore Finance Minister's comments on US-China trade war and its impact on the global economy. And Chatni Vatvani, well, she looks at how Indonesian authorities are using social media to crack down on terrorist networks. But first, tonight now, Malaysia's Home Minister Muhyiddin Yassin said the country's authorities have sufficient information that financier Jho Low is amongst the key criminals behind the 1MDB state fund scandal. The Anti-Corruption Commission has called for Mr. Low and the former director of SRC International, Nik Faisal Arif Kamil, to come forward and assist with the investigation. Now, Jho Low, or Low Taek Jo, has been named in multiple civil lawsuits by the US Department of Justice, which alleged that about $4.5 billion was misappropriated from 1MDB. He's a close friend of former Prime Minister Najib Razak's stepson, Riza Aziz, who has also been named in the US 1MDB probe. Now, earlier this year, the DOJ also filed criminal charges against him and seized his assets, including a $250 million yacht. Low was notorious for his glamorous parties with Hollywood stars and luxurious lifestyle. His whereabouts are currently unknown. Now, the second man named by the MACC is Nik Faisal Arif Kamil, the former director of SRC International. The MACC is currently honing in on the 1MDB subsidiary firm, which has been linked to a transfer of $10 million into Mr. Najib's personal account. Channel News Asia's Melissa Goh has more.
37-year-old Low Taek Jo, also known as Jho Low, is probably the most wanted man by the people in Malaysia, who see him as the mastermind behind the scam that defrauded billions of dollars from state investment fund 1MDB, founded by ex-Prime Minister Najib Razak. Hailed from the island of Penang, Jho Low was said to be a close associate and a family friend of Mr. Najib. Now, although he has never held any official position in 1MDB or any of his subsidiaries, authorities investigating the corruption and money laundering scandal said they are starting to connect the dots. Now, Malaysia's anti-graft agency, MACC, is now summoning him as well as his associate, Nik Faisal Arif Kamil, to assist in the corruption probe involving 1MDB's former subsidiary, SRC International. Now, the MACC had earlier quizzed Mr. Najib and his wife, Rosmah Mansor, over the $10.6 billion fund that were allegedly transferred from SRC International into the ex-Prime Minister Mr. Najib's bank accounts in year 2014 and 2015. Now, Nik Faisal was the managing director of SRC back then and the chief investment officer at 1MDB. Now, while both Jho Low and Nik Faisal's whereabouts are anyone's guess, Mr. Low, his spokesman said, has instructed his lawyers to immediately contact MACC to offer his assistance in relation to the probe. Now, Home Minister Muhyiddin Yassin, meanwhile, said he understands that the public is impatient, but explained that the authorities need a little bit more time to finalize the details and gather more information in order to bring Jho Low and Nik Faisal in, adding that the special task force set up to investigate and recover assets linked to 1MDB has been working tirelessly with foreign regulators towards that end. Melissa Goh, Channel News Asia, Kuala Lumpur.
Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is expected to arrive in Washington later today to meet US President Donald Trump. Our Washington correspondent Harry Horton says Japan is worried its interests won't be properly represented when President Trump meets North Korean leader Kim Jong-un next week.
Well, it was only back in April that Prime Minister Abe was last in the United States meeting with President Donald Trump. Clearly, I think there are some concerns on the Japanese side that because President Trump is so unpredictable, that Japan's priorities might not be at the forefront of President Trump's mind. Why is that? Well, in the past few weeks, we've heard the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that in talks with North Korea, they would like to address the threat to the United States. Now, that's very different from addressing the nuclear threat as a whole. There's also, I think, concerns that President Trump might try and strike some sort of deal with Kim Jong-un that reduces a US troop presence in South Korea. Japan wouldn't be very happy about that. We're also expecting some discussions on trade as well, where there's been some growing tensions between the US and Japan over the past few months. Now, almost every world leader is laser focused on this summit next week between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. I think we'll see many of them try and reach out to President Trump to try and get the US to bring up their concerns in this meeting. Prime Minister Abe is obviously hoping that with just a week to go, by speaking to President Trump so late on, his concerns and Japan's concerns will be at the forefront of President Trump's mind when he meets with Kim Jong-un next week.
U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton will be in Singapore for next week's historic Trump-Kim summit. Now, there had been reports that Mr. Bolton had been sidelined in these nuclear talks.
White House counsellor Kellyanne Conway told reporters that Mr. Bolton will be part of those talks. Her comments come a day after CNN reported that Mr. Bolton was not in President Donald Trump's meeting last week with the right-hand man of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. This implied that Mr. Bolton had lost influence with Mr. Trump. Ms. Conway said Mr. Bolton's absence in the meeting Kim Yong-chol means absolutely nothing. She added that he was preoccupied with other tasks.
The highly anticipated Trump-Kim summit was nearly derailed last month when Mr. Bolton compared the North Korean situation to Libya. Well, Mr. Bolton said that Pyongyang could follow a Libya model of verifiable denuclearization, and that alarmed Pyongyang, which had watched Libya's Colonel Gaddafi give up his nuclear program only for him to be overthrown and killed by Western-backed rebels a few years later.
There's another possible derailment to the Trump-Kim summit, though. The president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, says that Kim Jong-un was begging for the summit to be rescheduled after US president cancelled it. Mr. Giuliani quickly clarified his comments, saying that he was merely sharing his personal opinion and it did not represent either the US president or the US foreign policy team.
What I'm saying is that Kim Jong-un had someone say terrible things about Vice President Pence, terrible things about John Bolton, and then had someone threaten nuclear annihilation of the United States. President Trump didn't take that. What he did was he called off the summit, and he was widely criticized for it. And Kim Jong-un changed his position, said he was going to do denuclearization. Again, we don't have the conditions yet, but at least that's a big shift, and asked to have the meeting again. And that's what I mean by begging for it.
South Korea says that it is conducting three-way talks with North Korea and the US towards an early formal agreement to end the Korean War. The conflict ceased with an armistice in 1953 rather than a peace treaty, leaving the two sides technically at war.
President Trump has said that this would be a key topic at the much-anticipated Trump-Kim summit in Singapore next week. Seoul will operate a Singapore media center during the summit, raising speculation that South Korean President Moon Jae-in may be attending. But an official from the South's presidential office said chances of a trilateral summit between the two Koreas and the United States and Singapore next week looked slim, should the summit be the first of several meetings.
Singapore Foreign Affairs Minister Vivian Balakrishnan will be in Pyongyang for an official two-day visit. Dr. Balakrishnan will be in North Korea ahead of the Trump-Kim summit next Tuesday. And according to the Foreign Affairs Ministry, Dr. Balakrishnan was invited to Pyongyang by his counterpart, Foreign Affairs Minister Ri Yong-ho. He will also call on the North's ceremonial head of state, Kim Yong-nam. Sarah Caldy is also up ahead with the day's business headlines.
Yes, and Singapore's finance minister is sounding a warning on trade, Sarah.
Yes, Steve. Well, he warns of dire consequences if there is miscalculation in U.S.-China trade talks. We'll hear what he had to say during his trip to China after this break.
On Singapore tonight, unlicensed moneylenders increasingly
Canada, Japan, and the European Union are banding together to increase pressure on Washington following the Trump administration's metals tariffs. Now, they head to a meeting of Group of 7 industrialized countries in Quebec on Friday. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. Separately, Donald Trump's top economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, told reporters in Washington that the president is sticking to his guns. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said she expects difficult discussions at the summit this week. She cited differences with Mr. Trump on trade, climate, and security.
Freitag und Samstag wird jetzt der G7-Gipfel der Staats- und Regierungschefs stattfinden. Und ich glaube, jeder weiß, dass es dort schwierige Diskussionen geben wird. Denn grundsätzlich werden bei den G7-Gipfeln ja Themen wie Weltwirtschaft, Handel, Klimaschutz, Entwicklungs- und Außenpolitik diskutiert.
Now, while the United States and China are working to avoid a trade war, there is a risk of miscalculation, and this would have ramifications on the global economy. Singapore Finance Minister Heng Swee Keat said this to Singapore media yesterday during a 9-day visit to China, which ends on Friday. Leung Wai-kit reports.
A trade war will destabilize the global economy, starting with the financial markets. Finance Minister Heng Swee Keat sounded this warning near the end of his 9-day visit to China, calling trade wars a potential flashpoint. This comes on the back of growing trade tensions between the US and China, which announced a series of tit-for-tat tariffs earlier this year. Mr. Heng stressed that it's crucial to avoid further escalation.
And I think the Chinese leadership has exercised restraints in their comments, and they are putting effort to avoid such an outcome. And I would say that even American leadership is aware of the potential impact of this. You know, in a major negotiation like this, the risk of brinksmanship is always there, and I hope that it does not happen.
Free trade, said Mr. Heng, is the way to go. And that's why ASEAN has been pushing for deals with China and its key partners despite the challenges.
It will not be easy, particularly during this period when there are elections happening in various countries. But I think we should try. And the second thing that we need to do is that we have to address structural issues. There are winners and losers in this free trade, and countries will then have to look at policies that can help the losers to adjust to this new configuration. And that is why, in our case, we always had a free trade policy, and that's why we take economic restructuring so seriously.
One area that Singapore has been investing in is artificial intelligence. Mr. Heng attended the first Sino-Singapore Artificial Intelligence Forum in Nanjing, and he was impressed.
I think China is investing very serious effort in this area. And there's a very high level of awareness, both at the political leadership as well as in the leadership of the companies. The people value the convenience, they value the efficiency, they value the variety that this technology can bring.
To speed up the adoption of AI in Singapore, Mr. Heng said it's important to invest in R&D and to try new business models. Another crucial factor is to address issues relating to data confidentiality and ethics.
The machine itself doesn't make decisions, or it doesn't make moral decisions, but what we program into the machine and the algorithm that guides its decision will have very important moral implications. And we have to get a common understanding among our people as to how these decisions are going to be executed.
During a visit to Nanjing University, Mr. Heng said Singapore's younger leaders will continue to maintain close ties with China. As one of the fourth-generation ministers himself, he shared his impression of China's younger leaders during the interview.
And what strikes me about the Chinese leadership is that the Chinese leaders are selected on from a very rigorous system. When I look at the CV of the Chinese leaders, when I spoke to them about their experience, it is quite clear to me that they have undergone a series of tests before they are where they are. And so in terms of ability, it is impressive.
And to ensure that Singapore can take its friendship with countries in the region further, Mr. Heng said it's important to understand its own development priorities as well as those of the other parties. This way, Singapore can build on what's been achieved by its previous leaders. Leung Wai Kit, Channel News Asia, Beijing, China.
And I'll have more business news later in the hour, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. We'll come back to you in a bit. Also ahead here on Primetime Asia, more comfortable taking a backseat for now. Malaysia's Parti Keadilan Rakyat's de facto leader, Anwar Ibrahim, is in no rush to get back into Parliament.
Welcome back. Taiwan is carrying out its annual military drills that involved a simulated Chinese invasion. Now, this 5-day exercise is taking place at a time when Washington is seen as stepping up its support for Taiwan, despite Beijing's tougher stance over the self-ruled island that China claims as its own. Channel News Asia's Joyce Huang has more.
The Taiwanese military tested its ability to fend off the attempts by Chinese forces to take over the airbase in central Taiwan. After runs of aerial attacks, paratroopers started dropping. Along with ground troops, they fought fiercely to reclaim the base from the rival army. The combat readiness of more than 4,000 soldiers have been closely examined.
国家安全的重任就在我们的肩膀上，只要国军在，台湾就一定在。
Presided by Ms. Tsai, the joint anti-airborne exercise was the highlight of the 5-day drills as Beijing increasingly flexes its military muscle in the Taiwan Strait. Tensions have risen considerably in recent months. After Beijing stepped up its military presence in the Taiwan Straits, it has conducted live-fire drills, patrolled the region's airspace with bombers and new fighter jets, while repeatedly sailing its aircraft carrier through the Taiwan Strait. Amid the tensions, Washington is also seen as stepping up its support for Taiwan. U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis recently reaffirmed the U.S. military commitments, and the Pentagon is reportedly planning on sending a warship through the Taiwan Strait. Prior to that, the State Department had approved sales of submarine technology to the self-ruled island, which China claims as its own. But some observers in Taiwan worry that the island may be used as a bargaining chip by the U.S. to get trade concessions from China. Beijing has urged the U.S. to prudently handle the situation, calling Taiwan the most sensitive issue in the U.S.-China relations that may threaten the region's stability. Joyce Huang, Channel News Asia, Taichung.
Indonesian authorities are turning to social media to crack down on terrorist networks and tackle radicalism. In their latest move, the social media accounts of university students will be tracked.
And it comes in the wake of the arrest of 3 Riau University alumni last week. They had assembled bombs in the campus and were planning to blow up parliament buildings in Riau and Jakarta. Chatni Vatvani tells us more.
A report by the National Intelligence Agency revealed that about 40% of Indonesia's university students have been exposed to radical ideology. Now, this report is based on a survey conducted by the agency last year, and head of the agency, Budi Gunawan, previously told local media that there were 15 provinces in the country to which the agency was paying attention to with regards to this issue. The latest effort to crack down on this issue, according to what Minister for Education Muhammad Nasir has said to local media, will see data of lecturers and students being recorded. Now, this is data to do with their cell phone details and their social media accounts. The minister has said that the monitoring will not restrict academic activities and is not meant to ignore privacy, but rather is aimed at preventing radicalism from developing on campuses. Now, there are plans for him to meet with the heads of public universities at the end of this month to discuss specific measures to tackle radicalism and intolerance on campus, and how the measures will be implemented specifically as well. Also up for discussion are plans to include courses on nationhood in a new curriculum. University heads, meanwhile, have been urged to take strong, clear, and measured action if they come across any radical ideology on campus. Terrorism experts who have spoken to media say that campuses being used for recruitment of radical ideology isn't a new phenomenon because students are constantly interacting with outside parties. And the problem isn't so much as to how to monitor the campus, but rather how to deal with the narrative of these radical groups. Now, the Education Ministry has also said that it will work with the National Counterterrorism Agency and the National Intelligence Agency to overcome the issue.
That's right. Malaysia's Parti Keadilan Rakyat's de facto leader, Anwar Ibrahim, says he's more comfortable taking a back seat for now. The once jailed politician dismissed speculation that he will take over the Pandan parliamentary seat to contest for a by-election, which may pave the way for him to take over as Malaysia's Prime Minister from Dr. Mahathir Mohamad.
The Pandan seat is currently held by his wife and Deputy Prime Minister Wan Azizah Wan Ismail. Now, for that to happen, Dr. Wan Azizah will have to step down and make way for Mr. Anwar, a move which he says is impractical at this juncture.
Mr. Anwar also confirmed that he will not contest as a Member of Parliament any time before July 16th. That's when the first session of Parliament takes place. Mr. Anwar held his first official meeting with his party representatives yesterday since his release from prison.
Now, he was given a full pardon from Malaysia's king shortly after the Pakatan Harapan coalition won the May 9th elections. And at the meeting, Mr. Anwar also said it was improper for a person to speak against the institution of the Malay rulers without disputable facts. And he was referring to a statement made by a former journalist who accused the king of spending lavishly. Still to come, the UN inks a deal with Myanmar that will grant the organization access to the epicenter of the Rohingya crisis.
A reminder of our top stories this hour. Malaysian financier Jho Low has instructed his lawyers to contact the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission after it was reported that the agency is seeking his assistance in an investigation linked to the 1MDB scandal. The MACC is also looking for Nik Faisal Arif Kamil, Nik Othman Arif Kamil, the SRC International Director. With less than a week to go before meeting North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, US President Donald Trump plays host to Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe today. Mr. Abe is seeking to have his voice heard ahead of the historic Trump-Kim summit. Both leaders will then head to Canada for what promises to be a tense Group of 7 summit. Mr. Trump's aggressive trade policies have cast a shadow over the G7 summit. U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton will be in Singapore for next week's historic Trump-Kim summit. The announcement follows reports that Mr. Bolton had been sidelined from the nuclear talks. Now White House counsellor Kellyanne Conway told reporters that Mr. Bolton will indeed be part of those talks. Mr. Bolton was not there when President Trump met last week with the right-hand man of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Myanmar and the United Nations have signed a deal to allow some 700,000 Rohingya refugees to return home. But details remain skimpy on how the agreement would jumpstart the stalled repatriation program. Bangladesh and Myanmar signed a repatriation deal in November last year. The agreement would give UN access to Myanmar to assess the situation, but it lacked a concrete timeline. And it's unclear how UN access to the region would help to address fears over safety and rights of the Rohingyas. Now, to get a sense on the ground, we spoke to Daphne Cook from Save the Children International, and she told us a number of conditions need to be met before Rohingya refugees can return home.
Any repatriation needs to be voluntary. Any repatriation needs to be safe for refugee children and their families. It needs to be informed with Rohingya refugees aware of the conditions under which they'll be returning. And as you said before, it needs to have the substantive involvement of international actors like the UNHCR. The government of Bangladesh continues to show extraordinary generosity towards Rohingya refugees. However, they can't and shouldn't be expected to do this on their own. Humanitarian funding for the response needs to be ramped up. The response plan is drastically underfunded, and the international community needs to step up to make sure Rohingya people are provided with the support they so desperately need. I actually spent this week talking to facilitators who volunteer in learning centres, asking about them what is stopping children from getting this learning opportunity. And they said one of the biggest issues was children needing to work at home or around the camps. One facilitator told me that young girls don't access the centre because they just need to fetch water or firewood, which can be kilometres away to help their mothers. The same with boys. They're often doing manual labour, which just stops them from getting the learning that they need.
Thailand's government has shrugged off pressure to remove a ban on political activities with less than a year to a general election. This is despite all other election-related legislation being passed earlier this week.
Well, according to local media, many politicians believe the ban is preventing parties from preparing for the election. But Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha says the ban will remain in place to maintain peace and order. Instead, he will personally review all election activities, including campaigns, on a case-by-case basis.
Political parties say the ban makes it difficult for them to recruit members, hold general assemblies, or even draft policy manifestos. This means local primary elections due to take place this year could also now be in jeopardy. The general election is due to take place in February next year. It's been delayed several times since the military took power in a coup 4 years ago.
Still on Thailand now, the government is proposing to allocate $10 billion to its defence and security budget next year. It's part of a 20-year national strategy launched last year that future governments are required to follow.
$7 billion will go into defence. That's a $1 billion increase from 4 years ago when the military seized power. The remaining $3 billion will go into domestic security, such as maintaining order, protecting the monarchy and preventing cyber attacks. The proposed budget fits a historical pattern of Thai generals boosting military spending after taking power.
Mr. Prayut has promised elections this February, and this may be his last chance to allocate funds to the armed forces. Analysts say the money may also be used to fund a military-backed political party for the polls, as has been done in the past.
The state flag of the old government buildings in Singapore is being flown at half-mast today as a mark of respect and in recognition of the work by a member of the People's Action Party, Old Guard, Yeun Thong. He died on Sunday at the age of 88.
And this was the scene at Parliament House and over at the state courts. The government yesterday extended its condolences to Mr. Jack's family, with President Halimah Yacob and Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong among many who paid tribute to him.
The Prime Minister's office said Mr. Jack had contributed significantly to the building of modern Singapore. This included mobilizing the Chinese-speaking ground to support the PAP's vision of a non-communist, multiracial Singapore.
Mr. Jack, a member of Singapore's first cabinet, was also one of 10 ministers who signed the separation agreement in 1965. On Tuesday, Mr. Jack's family held a funeral following a private wake. New methods are being tested across the world to combat mosquito-borne diseases. And to encourage collaboration on such technologies, Singapore hosted a workshop for scientists to share their knowledge ahead of ASEAN Dengue Day next week. And Liana Othman has more.
The risk of epidemic diseases transmitted by mosquitoes is at its highest in history, particularly the potentially fatal yellow fever, says one expert.
And the reason for that is the increased epidemic activity in both Africa and in South America, and the movement of the virus out of both of those locations in travelers. Well, Singapore is highly exposed simply because you're a hub in Southeast Asia.
This is why scientists are finding new ways to suppress the population of Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, which are also the culprits behind dengue. Now, dengue is endemic in all ASEAN countries, and globally, there are some 390 million dengue infections each year. One way to tackle the disease is to release male mosquitoes infected by the Wolbachia bacteria into the environment. The eggs from female mosquitoes that mate with them will not hatch. Another method is using X-ray to make mosquitoes sterile. Now, these are now being tested in Singapore and other countries, including Australia and Thailand. Dr. Gubler says these are the most effective ways right now to curb the mosquito population. Fogging, on the other hand, is not enough.
They look good, it makes people feel good that the government is doing something, but they simply don't control very many mosquitoes.
Which is why he said an up-and-coming area of research is in residual insecticides. Now, if sprayed on walls, for example, the insecticide could last for months and will kill any mosquito that comes in contact with it.
To keep winning this war, we must innovate, invest in new technology, and collaborate and share knowledge. Public campaigns on dengue prevention and vector control is a part of Singapore's life, as long as there is no effective vaccination against this disease.
Dr. Gubler added that good vector control by the government and strong community engagement will make effective mosquito control achievable.
And still to come on Primetime Asia, China's Huawei denies collecting data from Facebook users after the social media giant confirmed that Huawei was among companies given access to user information. And Sarah will track those developments after the break.
Welcome back. Thailand's national airport operator is set to inject over $7 to $8 million to repair the runways at the Suvarnabhumi International Airport. It's addressing reports of soft spots found on taxi lanes. Our correspondent Saksit Saisombat tells us more.
Ever since Bangkok Suvarnabhumi Airport opened in 2006, there have been concerns over the fact that this airport has been built on swampland, and those concerns raised up again last summer when several international aviation organizations and also pilot federations have pointed out soft spots on the tarmac. They are on the taxiways, so basically the area and the roads between the landing strip and the terminals, and that's why the airports of Thailand, the operators of Thailand's biggest airports, have announced that they have already fixed 60% of the soft spots, and they are expecting to be done with all the repairs by the end of August. But that is only a short-term solution. It almost is like putting a band-aid on a gushing wound, and that's why they have also announced that they are spending $78.4 million for long-term solutions, which will see the asphalt that is now on the runway and on the tarmac being replaced with concrete. Now, as I said, this will take a long time, and they can only do that one little bit at a time. They said 10% of the whole runway at the time. But overall, in general, Bangkok Suvarnabhumi Airport is already bursting at its seams, with 60 million passengers being processed every year, and also admits a record number of tourist visitors. We had 35 million tourists from around the world visiting Thailand, and the hub that is supposed to be Suvarnabhumi is not a hub anymore, it's a bottleneck.
A firm denial from Huawei, the Chinese mobile phone maker, said it has never collected or stored Facebook user data. This after the social media giant acknowledged that it shared such data with them and other manufacturers. Wei Du takes us through the details of the claims and counterclaims.
A rather complicated story. It all started with the New York Times report saying that Facebook had a data sharing agreement with 60 device makers, through which these device makers could access Facebook personal information on the device owners as well as their friends. Now, Facebook has confirmed that these agreements did exist. It said they date all the way back to the early days of smartphones, when Facebook couldn't get its app onto a lot of devices. So the company decided to provide some tools to device makers so they could replicate that Facebook experience on their devices. So in a way that allows them to access the user data, but Facebook denies that anyone could ever use these channels to access data on users that didn't consent to their data being shared. Among these 60 device makers, we have the familiar names, including Apple, Samsung, Amazon, Microsoft, and BlackBerry, when BlackBerry was still a thing. So rightly, people are concerned, especially after the Cambridge Analytica episode, how Facebook is handling user data. But enter China's Huawei, and the conversation changes. That's because Huawei has been deemed a national security threat to the United States. And yesterday, Senator Marco Rubio sent out a provocative tweet saying that Facebook letting Huawei access user information might as well, it's the equivalent of handing that data directly to the Chinese government. Now, Facebook and Huawei have both said that these data is not stored on Huawei servers, and this agreement between them will lapse at the end of the week.
The growth of e-commerce in India is creating new opportunities for businesses to make money online. And Walmart's recent multi-billion-dollar investment into the industry is helping to boost the sector. But some local shop owners are worried about how e-commerce will affect them. Our correspondent Rebecca Bundan reports from Mumbai.
He's built a thriving business selling wind chimes online through Amazon, and Krishna Mishra runs his operation out of his home in Mumbai. Just a few years ago, he couldn't have imagined that such an occupation would be possible in India.
As for the e-commerce, I'm sitting right in Bombay and I'm selling to the Jammu, Kashmir, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Assam. So it's the kind of reach that e-commerce has. So I think it's very good for a business.
E-commerce is rapidly growing in the country, creating opportunities for Indians to find new avenues of work. In a sign of the industry's progress and further growth to come, US retail giant Walmart in May bought a 77% stake in Flipkart, India's homegrown answer to Amazon, for $16 billion. China's Alibaba has pumped close to $2 billion into Indian e-commerce ventures over the past 3 years, including into
population with upwardly mobile, huge aspiration. So obviously, there will be, I expect, a lot more initiatives.
India's e-commerce industry is still in its infancy, but it's expected to expand by 30% a year to reach a gross merchandise value of $200 billion in the next 8 years, according to Morgan Stanley. But with the rise of e-commerce and global brands such as Walmart and Amazon investing in the industry, this is causing concern among small shop owners who are worried they won't be able to compete with online channels and will go out of business. For its part, Walmart says it will partner with local store owners to help modernize their retail practices and adopt digital payment technologies. Some shopkeepers remain skeptical, though.
मेरा भी शेयर से कुछ फायदा होने वाला नहीं है वो अभी खाली मीठा मीठा बोल के सबको घुस रहा है फिर अपने सबको पीछे से हमारा को सबको बाहर करने वाला है.
For Mr. Mishra, the growth of e-commerce has blown good fortune his way, and he believes many more Indians will be able to ring up similar success by selling online. Rebecca Bunsen, Channel News Asia, Mumbai.
And those are your business updates this hour, guys.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah. Still to come here on Primetime Asia.
So Trump likes the life of luxury, Kim Jong-un likes the life of luxury, so let's wrap the burger in gold.
And that's why we're looking at gilded cuisine ahead of the Trump-Kim summit. We'll be right back with that story.
Taiwan has one of the highest success rates of test tube babies in the world. Its advanced technology and low cost have drawn many infertile couples from overseas. Channel News Asia's Victoria Yeun reports.
Miss Yeun from Hong Kong is receiving fertility treatment in Taiwan with her husband.
我是在早上打完针以后，然后中间的时间会回酒店休息一下，然后下午就开始出发去 shopping。
More and more infertile couples, home and abroad, are flocking to Taiwan for fertility treatment. Its success rate is a factor, and so is price. Fierce competition has kept the cost of treatment to less than half that of Hong Kong and China.
所以人家来台湾喜欢做的原因是，台湾的医生效率又高，怀孕率又好，又便宜，然后还可以顺便到台湾观光一下。
The island has a success rate of nearly 40% for test tube babies born by women under the age of 40. It's among the highest in the world, according to the Taiwan Society for Reproductive Medicine.
那台湾是最优秀的学生都考医学系，所以考到医学系，那早期的时候又是名列前茅的人选妇产科，所以我们有很多很好的一些 pioneer 在前面。
Demand for fertility treatment in Taiwan is high, as 1 out of every 7 couples is infertile, says the Health Promotion Administration. Behind me is the Taipei Medical University Hospital, one of Taiwan's leading fertility treatment centers. This institute and several others like it has seen the number of assisted reproduction cases in Taiwan quadrupled over the past decade. Latest official figures show that test tube babies comprise more than 3% of all method. Victoria Jen, Channel News Asia, Taipei.
Less than a week to go before the Trump-Kim summit takes place here in Singapore, and restaurants and bars in the Lion City are cooking up creative food and drinks to mark the historic occasion.
And these include a burger with gold leaves to a pair of drinks called bromance. Kamini Devdas with more.
A burger patty coated with 4 gold sheets, this Singapore Summit burger is meant to give diners a taste of the high life.
Have you ever been to Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue? The building's gold. It's gold. Everything is gold when you go into Trump Tower. So Trump likes the life of luxury. Kim Jong-un likes the life of luxury. So let's wrap the burger in gold. Have some fun with it.
The burger is made from a mix of ingredients representing both Korean and US cultures, such as USDA prime beef and kimchi pickled cucumbers. A 7-Up mayo is then used as the burger sauce.
It's spicy, it's sweet. You actually get that full body of the 7-Up in there that helps bring in that spiciness.
The burger is completed with fries topped with seaweed, chili oil, Korean chili flakes and sesame seeds. The meal is priced at $88 and will be available for dinner from 11 June to 16 June. Mexican restaurant and bar Lucha Loco is also getting in on the act with the El Trompo, a cheeseburger taco, and Rocket Man, a Korean fried chicken taco. Each taco is sold for $10
To create something fun, part of our branding is Loco, and that's crazy and fun in Mexican. And we thought we'd call this campaign the Loco Summit. The Loco Taco Summit.
There's also a Friday and Saturday night draw where customers who purchase the tacos may have a chance to smash Trump-Kim piñatas.
1, 2, 3.
Over at local bar Hop Hits, customers can have some fun with a tongue-in-cheek drink called bromance. The drink is sold in pairs and is priced at $19
Ingredients chosen were quite simple. Diet Coke is actually President Donald Trump's favorite drink, so we definitely had to put it in. And then there was Asahi Black and tequila. That is to give an extra alcohol kick to the drink. And the final touch of soju shot was actually to add a little bit of Korean, representative of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Customers will also be given this World Peace sticker once they have finished their drink. Hop Hit says the sticker represents hope that something good will come out of the summit.
Asahi Black, tequila, and soju.
That's like a lethal combination.
What could go wrong?
That's if they're still standing by the end of the evening after the drink. That sounds like really lethal.
I'm sure someone out there is thinking about cafefe coffee, all these other keywords that we've learned over the the experience of Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Dotard might be related to something.
They could have that as part of the menu, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay, would you have what would you do if you had to make a drink, create a drink?
I know Stormy's got to get a reference somewhere. But anyway, we'll keep that to ourselves. If you have any, send them to us. Steve I, CNA, Glenda Chong, CNA. We'd love to hear what you think. We're going to be having a lot of coverage, comprehensive coverage, in fact, of the Trump-Kim summit that takes place next Tuesday, the 12th. A lot of us will be in over the weekend preparing for it, in fact. So do keep it right here on all our platforms, on air and online, Channel News Asia.
See you in a bit.